throughout the year, ये debate चलती रही between online and offline retailers, and offline retailers went to government, online retailers came up with the discounts, and I mean we have seen that happening, right? Now, do you think इसमें regulatory framework जो है that needs to evolve the pace at which the online marketplace in India is evolving, and maybe not necessarily as a part of the budget, maybe government can state the intent in the budget and then follow it up with the framework. But do you think this area needs to be addressed? ये जो gray area है between online offline.
Yeah, there's one clarification there. If you look at what government had done, right, they very specifically released a press note 3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which actually talked about the marketplace model for any FDI backed companies, right? So I think when we talk about online retailers in India in general, a lot of them are marketplaces, right? And what inherently happened is these marketplaces ended up bringing the offline retailers onto online. So majority of the sellers, if you see on these marketplaces, are actually offline retailers. Therefore, I would see it as a more or less a game between big organized retailers in India versus a lot of smaller retailers coming through these online channels. So it's a way of actually giving these smaller sellers an exposure. Like, if you look at like what we are doing, or even like, a lot of other marketplaces, that's essentially what is happening. I think that's one thing that needs to be kept in mind. From the government perspective and what they're trying to do, there's a bit of clarity that came with it. There's also a lot of areas which are not defined very well. Again, I think government is actually looking to define a lot of that. Many of those policy statements were vague enough. We don't know, so where to stop, what to do. And I think that would be beneficial for us if there is more clarity around how to do it. Anything that is there, if once it is clear, then I think the framework in which you operate would be pretty easy.
Absolutely. Any more questions? Yeah, at the back.
My question is regarding the recent nationalist call that the likes of Ola and Flipkart raised when they requested the government of India to intervene by safeguarding their interests, by safeguarding their business against foreign competition like Amazon and Uber. So my question is it fair for them to ask for such a favor by the government of India? And if it is, then to what extent should the government really extend that support? Because if they really do that, then the signal that they are giving to the external for FIIs is that we are not really very, the environment is not very conducive for investment and business in India. So how fair is for Olas and Flipkarts of India to seek that support? And if yes, if it is fair, then to what extent can the government?
That's a good question. Ravi, आप क्या कहना चाहेंगे?
So, I'd say first and foremost, a level playing field is necessary, but it's not clear to me what they asked for specifically yet, and it's not been out there. Lots of people have been commenting on this. What they've said is, I think they want a level playing field in terms of policy, in terms of no foreign competitor being given extra preference. But beyond that, in terms of what are they proposing the government do for them? It's not been discussed publicly yet, right? In some sense. Now, I think fundamentally India is an open economy. I think we don't want to go back to ambassadors and fiat money, and kind of roll back what we kind of stand for, right? I think, but at the same time, I would love to see Indian companies born here serve our market, grow like mad, and become global leaders. So to the extent we can build a nurturing environment where we can help them without necessarily preventing others from being able to compete, because competition is healthy, it builds a global leader. It builds a globally competitive player, right? And so if you just play one-day cricket in your state only, how will you ever play test cricket?
Right.
So I think in some sense you do, but you do need to have training facilities, you do need to have stadiums, you do need to have leagues of our own, right? All of that. So that requires infrastructure, it requires support, it requires nurturing. all of that, right? So I think to the extent we can provide all that support infrastructure, I'm very supportive of it, right?
Right.
To the extent that we ensure a level playing field and policy so that there's not an unfair advantage for somebody who comes in with international capital versus somebody who's trying to raise in domestic capital to go compete, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think beyond that, I'm not sure it's been articulated what else is required or what else is being asked of, right?
Right. Rosto, I have a different question, not really linked to this. Lekin, to further encourage R&D, and I'm not specifically talking about IT industry, I'm talking about industry in general. I think there is a lot that needs to be done as far as R&D is concerned. And I mean, what steps government can actually take apart from tax incentives to maybe encourage that culture of companies investing more in R&D and creating a more sustainable maybe product pipeline or innovation?
I think if you look at the rest of the world, some of the most innovative research, some of the most path-breaking research happens in academic institutions. If you look at, say, in the US, an institution like an MIT or a Stanford from a technology perspective, and similarly many other universities on other issues like economics or market behavior or other areas, the academic world typically creates the is like a hotbed of research. Indian academic institutions suffer from a couple of bottlenecks. Firstly, just sheer availability of money. So more grants, more support to the institutes will be useful. Secondly, there is still a lot of bureaucratic oversight over the research over the academic institutes in India in terms of appointment of governors and boards and so many other things which somehow inhibit the technology institutions and the research institutions in India from pursuing opportunities, complete blue sky thinking, which then creates that intellectual property in any form, whether it's technology or non-technology. So I think creating a free hand and creating some kind of a reliable budgetary support, regular grants in some form or fashion to academic institutions, I think will probably be the most important first step for encouraging research in India.
So, just to add to that, I also feel that there is another type of R&D, right? When we typically think of R&D, you would think of it happening in labs. But the reality is, I would say the Startup India scheme is actually encouraging R&D. Because if it's all about innovation, most startups who are trying to radically, disrupt the way traditionally various sectors, various industries have worked, when they come up with technology products to support that space, or when they come up with new and innovative operating models, that is indeed fostering innovation. And along those lines, therefore, to my earlier point on the wish list, I would feel that as part of the Startup India campaign, one thing that the government has done very well is, of course, to waive off the income tax liabilities for startups for a period of 3 years. I do think that could go the extra mile, and the cherry on the cake could be to actually waive off the service tax liabilities.
Service tax also.
Because really what startups incur in their formative years, unfortunately, fortunately, obviously most of the startups will not really make profits in the first few years to be able to have any income tax liabilities. But yeah, if the service tax burden could be reduced, I do believe that all the startups on this forum today are innovating in their own way, and they're coming up with not just technology products, but also, like I said, new age operating models, and that needs to be encouraged. Incentives like those could actually go a long way.
Right. We'll take one last question from the audience. Yeah, please.
Yeah, hi, I'm Aditya. In continuation to this R&D related question, all the companies are actively adopting this automation, and in next few years, possibly India will be one of the key players in the world of automation, right? Of course, it brings that ability of doing more and more at for less and less. So what kind of incentives could really help us in taking it to the next level as a country? That is part one. The next question is, there's a villain also in the story in the form of job losses to the workforce, right? So what could be the contingency plans for that?
Govind, aap answer karna.
I think this automation, of course, is fantastic. I'm saying, look at the way in which QA testing has changed every time you release a product. Your cycles, we release two versions a month. The only way in which you could do 2 versions a month is automated testing. Yeah, you can't do otherwise. Yeah. So obviously, any kind of automation actually increases the efficiency, and it's welcome. But to your question on job losses, I think there's a very Malthusian sort of way of looking at it. Malthus said many years ago that there'll be so much population on the planet that the planet will die and not be able to support. But every time something like this happens, there is one more paradigm shift that comes and changes the story. So my own view is that if automation comes, people will have to learn new skills, but that reality is already there in the market. I mean, I don't think you can have one skill today and that skill take you through for 40 years of employment. I think those days are gone. So my view is that anyway in today's economy, everybody is reinventing themselves, and therefore I don't see this as a big issue at all. I think what it will do is dramatically increase the efficiency. Yes, there is a lot more effort that's going on in skilling India, that an entire campaign around building skills. I guess that needs to have more urgent momentum. But my own view is that this point of view that people have, saying people will go out of jobs and therefore there will be some unmitigated disaster, I don't think it will come to pass.
One other point to look at it, I think undeniably technology change brings human disruption. I think we should be conscious of it. And therefore there are two possible wavelengths at which you can operate on this one. One wavelength is to create this national gross minimal income kind of a scheme where those who are, say, for example, 55 and find it difficult to learn a new technology or in some ways disadvantaged from a learning point of view, create some kind of a social support when these kind of large technology disruptions happen. I think there is some amount of merit to evaluate it a little further and make sure that you implement it after you think through all the challenges. The second more optimistic way to look at it also is that previously when technology disruptions have happened, for example, when the internal combustion engine came and cars became popular, every single person who was trained to ride a horse carriage is all jobless, right? And similarly, every 30, 40 years, the world has introduced different technologies and labor force across the world has learned to cope, has learned to adopt. So to that extent, I still have a lot of confidence in the fundamental evolution of human thought and in humanity raising it. But I think we're talking a little bit of a large numbers here, more accelerated time frames here. So some policy frameworks to evaluate and give some kind of support to a certain section of people. Obviously, I still feel confident that the majority will evolve fairly quickly to keep in touch. But there will be some small sections of population who will find it difficult to adopt as quickly as is required. And some form of public policy support for them may also be necessary.
I just want to add an example. I think not too many years ago, maybe 15, 20 years ago, when you walked into a bank, you wouldn't see a single computer, right? And I remember, there was a strike by bank employees because computers were being introduced. I mean, do you feel today that you can actually do your banking without computers? Everybody has evolved and learned. To Rosto's point, even those who are 40, 45 at that point in time have evolved to learn because technology finally helps you do that job better. If you're a worker in a factory and you're doing the same repetitive task, and if automation can help that, I mean, you can be put whichever factory you're working in, the quality of job that you will have will be better, and that's what automation sort of helps us do. So I think yes, there'll be some reskilling required, and there'll be some obviously government is doing something on that front. But fundamentally, the entire premise that disruption results in human tragedy, I think humans are far more resilient than that.
By the way, I also feel that joblessness should hopefully not be an issue because there's so much left to be done, so many problems to be solved. I mean, we're still waiting for flying cars, we still need to go to Mars, we still need to solve Bangalore traffic. So I don't think that our job as human race would be done for a very, very long time. So hopefully joblessness should not be an issue.
So what we really need is maybe our own Tesla and our own Elon Musk.
Absolutely.
All right. So
there are many of those in India, right? I think if you look at some of the best examples of entrepreneurship in India over the last 50 years, I think we've had as many proud examples in India as anywhere else in the world. And just that maybe Indians shy a little bit of media and we don't package our news as much and don't make as much drama about it. But I don't think Indian entrepreneurs are anyway less compared to any of the international players.
Absolutely. So that's, I think that's the best way to sum it up. And उम्मीद यही करते हैं कि इस बार जो बजट होगा वो भी इन सारी चीज़ों को ध्यान में रखेगा और एक ऑप्टिमिस्टिक न सिर्फ सिनेरियो बल्कि रोड मैप भी क्रिएट करेगा. बहुत बहुत शुक्रिया आप सभी का हमारे साथ इस बातचीत में शामिल होने के लिए. बट द डी डे इज़ ऑन February 1 जब सरकार अपना बजट पेश करेगी और क्या ये वाकई एक जेन नेक्स्ट बजट होगा ये जानने के लिए you will have to stay tuned with Zee Business. Thank you so much.